very warm good evening to everyone present here. Welcome to the 104th session of the Informal Discussion Group. Today, we have with us Ms. Charvi Jain, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and the founder of Over a Cup of Tea. Thank you so much, ma'am, for agreeing to have a session with us. I would request Sakshi Sharma to introduce the guest for everyone.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Before we begin the session, I would like to give a brief introduction of a guest. Today, we have with us Ms. Charvi Jain, who as a psychologist and a psychotherapist has brought a difference in the lives of over 10,000 individuals. She is also the founder of one of its kind psychological wellness center, Over a Cup of Tea, that has been changing the way the therapy is looked at. The center was recently recognized as the top 3 therapy centers in Kolkata. Charvi ma'am completed her master's in counseling psychology from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. And she's also a certified CBT and EMDR practitioner, which are two of the most forthcoming psychotherapies. The topic for today's session is building resilience in the face of adversity. While we are all trapped in the middle of this pandemic, we hope that this session will help us all in some way or the other. And we look forward for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sakshi. I would request Charvi ma'am, without further ado, to begin with her lecture.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sakshi and Aditi, for that kind introduction. It's honestly a very big honor for me to be a part of this and to be addressing all of you today in this 104th Informal Discussions Group. I'm actually quite excited to interact with all of you. You know, you're going to be the budding lawyers of tomorrow. So it's quite exciting to have this opportunity to have this interaction, especially talking about resilience, which I believe is a very important skill. So I know that you've probably, in the course of this last one and a half year, you've probably attended a zillion webinars and have had like enough online sessions. So, well, I'm sure you might be thinking this is just another one, and you might already be having Zoom fatigue, you know, the term that we've been using quite a lot these days. Well, which is why I thought I'll keep this session very crisp, and we'll talk about very important points which I believe that can be really helpful in the current times and in general whenever you face a setback or any kind of adversities. And I'm pretty sure that by the end of the session, you will leave the session with some takeaways. I think I'm that confident about this for sure. So, you know, just cutting the, not wasting too much time, I'm just going to, delve right in. So just to start with, let me ask you this question. Have you ever wondered, how two people in the same situation react so differently? You know, like even two siblings sometimes, coming from the same family, the same upbringing, despite that, they seem to be so different. They seem to be reacting to situations, whether it's good situation or like a difficult situation, challenging situation. The reactions are so different, right? Even in this pandemic, I know that, yes, we all come from different privileges and we all have different battles to fight. But even when things are very similar, we react differently, and the variation is so much, right? So any thoughts on why this might be there? What factors contribute to this? Well, I'm guessing you will not be able to talk, so I'm just going to keep it one-sided for now, but I would love to have questions towards the end of the session. We're going to keep like proper half an hour for just Q&A. So if you have any questions, any doubts, any comments, I would love to hear all of you. So I think, just to answer this question, I think some of you might suggest that it's to do with our personality traits, right? Genetics, like some of us are just genetically, a lot more sensitive to certain things. Some of us have certain traits that, let's say, we might just be physically stronger, so we might be more confident when it comes to some physical challenges that we might have. So, well, yes, I totally agree. There are certain personal traits that do get passed on genetically, and those are certain things that we are born with, and they do contribute to how we look at situations. Similarly, some of you might even say that environment, the situations that we are in, the families that we come from, a lot of that, and the kind of challenges that we are facing, that also sort of contribute to how we might react to it. So yes, that is true as well. Both personality and environment, they do shape up, how we react to certain things. Now, here's a third thing also, which I believe can have a huge impact, which is our mindset. Our thoughts, beliefs, value systems that we might have. That also may come from a lot of conditioning, and we may have picked up value systems that we see around. We may have learned it from our families or whatever we watch and see around us. Yes, of course, that does play a role. But ultimately, it is our thoughts, our beliefs, and our actions, which means that we can change it. Which means at any point of time we feel that, okay, it's not working for me, it's not healthy. I can change it. And that exactly is what I like to believe is resilience. Resilience is that capacity that we have, the capacity over our behavior, thoughts, and actions that we can change and that we can adapt to any adversities or setbacks that we might have. And that the good part about this is that resilience is actually not a trait. It's not something that you're born with or something that you have or don't have. It is something that can be built upon, and it is on a continuum. Again, it's not a binary that, okay, either you have resilience or you don't have. Well, I'm sure all of you out here, you might be resilient in your own ways already. But resilience is something that can always be built upon, and you can always work upon getting more of it so that you are just, you have more skills and you're more equipped to deal with anything that comes by you. So yeah, just two things that I want to clarify here. Resilience is not a trait. It is something that can be learned, which is why we are doing this session in the first place. Otherwise, you would be like, oh, I don't have it, can't do anything about it, no point. But no, it can be learned. It's something you can always train your mind and you can always pick up on the go, right? Maybe we can look at resilience as like a mental reservoir, like something that, we can count upon when we are going through a difficult or challenging time. So let's look at resilience as that, right? But another important point to remember is that having resilience doesn't mean that we don't feel the pain or that we don't feel the hurt and the suffering or the grief, right? It just means that we are probably more equipped to handle that pain. We are more equipped to handle anything that comes by us, be it emotional challenges or actual practical challenges that might come by, right? So then what contributes to resilience? What helps us be more resilient? So I know why, there are hundreds of ways that can help us be more resilient. And I'm sure when you Google, you will find a lot of different things that come by. And I'm sure all of them work to some extent. But I think what I've done is I've picked out 5 really important ones, especially the ones that I have seen in my clients, that has really helped them to deal with certain situations personally, and at the same time, looking at what research and studies tell us. So these 5 points, if you have them, chances are that you will be able to deal with most of whatever comes your way, right? So, and the good thing is all of these 5 points can be learned and can be built upon. So I'm just directly going to the first point, and that is switching to a growth mindset from a fixed mindset. So let me explain what this really means, right? So let me ask you a question again, which is when we think about failure, how many of you have this belief that, oh, if I fail, that means that I am untalented, that I don't have any skills and I'm stupid? And how many of you believe that if I fail, that's okay, just give me a chance to grow and learn and do it differently next time, right? I mean, same thing, which is failure, but we can have 2 different approaches to it. We can have a different mindset to it. So the former mindset is called as the fixed mindset. So people who have a fixed mindset, they assume that talent is set, in the sense that certain skills and traits are set and we cannot do anything about it. We are either born with it or that's it. If we don't have it, we don't have it. If we have it, then great. Only then we can be successful. So these people usually, they end up like any point of time, they feel like they might fail or they might not be successful or do something right, they immediately quit before even going ahead, because they can't deal with that failure. Because if they fail, it would mean that maybe they are stupid or they are unsmart, they're unintelligent, right? So that's why they keep doing things only which they are 100% confident that they can do it. Otherwise, they will just not do it. So they are the people who might just quit very, very quickly. On the other hand, is these people who have a growth mindset. So they believe that talent can be grown. It is something that with your effort and hard work, you can keep learning on the go. So these are the people who will probably put in a lot of effort, who will not give up too easily, who will probably not be jealous of other people's achievements either. Because people who believe that their talents is fixed, they might just really be, they might feel very inferior when, somebody around them is doing very well, because they'll be like, oh, they have that skill and I don't. But people with a growth mindset would probably look at, oh, wow, that's so awesome. I want to be more like them. So they are going to try and work on themselves, versus the other side, which is going to just feel so inferior and feel so helpless about the situation and not do anything, right? So yes, so I think whether you have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset can have a huge impact on your relationship with success or failure, and your relationship with adversities and challenges and difficult situations that come your way. So people who have the growth mindset might look at an adversity and actually look at it as a challenge, as something that they will come stronger out of. While people with a fixed mindset might even victimize themselves, might say that, okay, what's wrong with me? Why is this happening to me? This shouldn't have happened. And if this has happened, it means that my life is doomed. Like this is true, right? A lot of us do face that kind of mindset, or some of your friends might have this kind of mindset, right? So just switching this mindset can actually give you a lot of resilience too. And now you may argue with me rather that, no, but there are certain traits which are set, isn't it? We are born with certain skills and talents. Like some of us are born with that musical ear, while some of us are born with, very sharp memory. So now, to you, I think I want to say, do you know of this term, neuroplasticity? Well, neuroplasticity is the capacity of our brain to adapt, modify, and change the structure and functionality of the brain just to adapt to the new experiences that might be required. And that's extremely fascinating, this neuroplasticity. So what does it really mean? It means that our brain has the capacity to keep changing and adapting to new things that is required of you. So I'll give you an example to explain this. I don't know if you've heard of London cab drivers. So London cab drivers, basically, to become a cab driver in London, you have to pass this very difficult test. Because this test basically requires them to learn every single street that is there in the city, and also the entire navigation of the map. They need to just learn it by heart and not make any mistakes to be able to pass and get the license of becoming a cab driver. So there was a study that basically did a brain scan of all the people, all of these cab drivers before they started studying for this exam, and after they had passed this exam. And there was like a really fascinating find, that was that after they had completed and passed their exam, their brain scans revealed that the posterior hippocampus, which is responsible for long-term memory and responsible for spatial navigation, the gray matter there had grown to an exponential way. There are so many new neural pathways that had developed in that area. So imagine, what does it say? That just studying for that exam for so many months, it actually made them sharper when it came to memory. It made them more, if I can say, smarter when it came to navigation, and it wasn't there before. So yeah, it's a very fascinating study. You can even Google about it. But this is just one such example. There are like thousands of examples out there, which tell us that our brain has a capacity of learning whatever we expose itself to. So if we want to become better at music, if we expose ourselves to music all day, you will get there, right? So that's the thing, so the idea that our brain can adapt to things and knowing it can actually give you a lot of motivation when you are in a setback situation. It can help you understand that you can come out of it, you can adapt to it, you can learn new things and new traits, and you can basically find your way to deal with it. Right? Fascinating, isn't it? Okay, so moving on to my next point, and the next point is I call it realistic optimism. Okay, so I think within this last 1.5 years, I'm sure, not just 1.5 years, in life, I think, whenever we have, whenever we are going through something distressing, or we are going through a very difficult emotion, it could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be some negative emotion or negative experiences, and we go and we share about it to maybe our, close people. What is the most common response that we get? I think the common responses that I have heard of is be positive, isn't it? Our culture is so obsessed with positivity that it's almost like we are not allowed to feel sad. You're not allowed to feel any negative emotions. It's like we need to be happy all the time. We need to, feel good all the time. Otherwise, something is wrong, So because of this culture that we are in, anytime we feel something negative, we have this urge to just, put it away. Either we dismiss it, or we suppress it, or we just distract ourselves or do something so that it changes. Or even when we talk about it somebody else, we feel like, oh my God, like, we shouldn't be feeling this way. So now that is a huge problem because, well, this is life and we are humans and we come with a gamut of emotions. It's not possible to be positive all the time. It's not possible to be happy all the time. We will have ups and downs. We will have difficult days and challenges, right? And it's okay to feel all of those emotions. Now, the problem comes when we just don't accept that emotion, and that problem comes when we feel like we need to put the pressure to ourselves to just be positive, right? And now psychologists call it toxic positivity. I don't know if you heard that term, but I think it's gaining momentum these days. So the idea is not to be positive all the time. The idea is not to be optimistic all the time, because that would be unrealistic, right? That would be like, there are a lot of people currently who believe that they will never get COVID. So they are roaming around outside without a mask and, gathering in crowds. Well, that's stupidity, isn't it? So being so optimistic, it's almost like being overconfident and doing stupid things, because that's not, honestly, that's not realistic. So yes, being optimistic is good, but only to a certain extent, only when it's realistically optimism. So I'm not saying that we should probably be pessimistic too, or we should keep thinking about all the worst things that can happen to us. But maybe there could be a middle ground, and that middle ground is that believing that yes, good things will happen to us, believing that maybe we might be more protected against the negative circumstances, but believing that all of that will happen only because we are putting in the effort around it. So being realistically optimistic means that we recognize our agency for that good things to happen to us. If we believe that we are going to be successful, or we have a certain goal, I know that I'm going to reach there because I'm putting in the effort and I'm being prepared and doing all that I can to reach there. Not blindly that I know it's going to happen without me doing anything. That would be unrealistic, right? So realistic optimism is knowing what your goals are, knowing what you want, and then working towards it, and knowing that, trusting yourself that you will get there. And that's a beautiful trait to have. That is a trait that can really help you get through any difficult situation and make you more resilient than the other. Right. So that's the second point. And now coming to the third point, and this point is something very personal. I truly believe in it, and that's self-compassion. So I know that self-care, self-compassion is becoming quite popular these days. It's almost become like the new millennial lingo, and something cool that we talk about it. Oh, we should believe in self-care. But I just believe that it's so much more than that. Like, it's not just a cool thing that we need to adapt to. It's something very essential that we all need to think about and work upon. And why? Let's look at this example again. So let's imagine a situation. Let's imagine you have somebody, let's call them a colleague, who, whenever you meet them, they always end up putting you down. They are always talking derogatory with you, or putting you down, insulting you, or criticizing you in some or the other way. So let's say if you have to meet them, for 10 minutes today, how do you think you're going to feel after that? Probably not good. You might feel a little low in mood for quite some time, maybe hours, maybe even day. Your entire day your mood might shift, and you might feel not so good the entire day. And for some of us, it can be days also, right? If it was someone close who did that to us, we might keep thinking about it, and it might spoil the rest of our days, or probably weeks also, right? And sometimes certain things can be so hurtful that it can even impact us years later, isn't it? So yes, that is true, because any negative thing that we come across, like if it's a criticism or somebody putting us down, it can have a huge impact on us. And studies even suggest that children who grow up around parents who are very critical or who are very intimidating, they usually grow up to be adults who do not believe in themselves, who have a lot of self-doubts, or may even feel very dissatisfied about anything that they achieve. Yeah. So now, when we talk about this study, in how many hours do you think these children interact with parents nowadays? Probably just 2-3 hours, or 4, or let's say even 5, going on the upper side. So imagine just interacting with people who are a little critical for 5 hours in a day can have such a huge impact on our adult life. It can impact our confidence, it can impact our, the way we feel satisfied about things. So imagine if we were to be with that person 24/7 all the time. And what if I were to tell you that there are a lot of us who are with that person 24/7? Yes, I'm talking about you all here, and me probably too. Well, it's the ones, yes, it's true, because I'm talking about how we interact with ourselves, because there are a lot of us here who habitually interact with ourselves in a very critical manner, right? Don't we, like, some of us have this habit of saying that, oh, I'm such a fool, I'm so stupid, I totally messed up, and I'll never get ahead. I'm such a failure, I'm not good enough. A lot of times we have this, the way we talk to ourselves is very, very derogatory, is very, very putting ourselves down. For some of us, it's the way we motivate ourselves, that what's wrong with you? You need, you can't even do this much better. You need to, you can't even get this right. So we think that this is the way we motivate ourselves. But you know what? This is extremely detrimental to your mental health, because we are interacting with ourselves not just 2 or 3 hours in a day. We are interacting with ourselves all the time, 24/7. Even when we are not consciously interacting, our subconscious mind is interacting. So even when we are sleeping, our mind is constantly active and we are interacting with ourselves. So the way we talk to ourselves, the habit that we have in talking to ourselves, can have a huge impact on our confidence level, on the way we are. And confidence is a huge trait that can help us in adversities, right? So confidence is a huge trait that can help us be more resilient. So now, how can you be more confident? How can you be more, how can your self-esteem be higher? Is when you can be, more compassionate to yourself, when you talk to yourself in a more compassionate manner. So now, by compassion, I don't mean that, being so arrogant, thinking that, oh, I'm the best, and it's not self-pity either, not thinking that, oh, poor me, I made that mistake, poor me. But self-compassion is about talking to yourself in a more kind manner, recognizing and acknowledging that, yes, you have made a mistake, but that's okay, because you are a human, and you are a work in progress. So you can just learn from it, move forward, and maybe try to not make that mistake again. So, well, that's self-compassion for you. So here's certain, a tip, for those of you who find it hard to be compassionate to yourself. Maybe you can try and talk to yourself like the way you talk to a close friend who is going through a hard time or who's just told you that they made a blunder. What would you tell that friend? That, oh, you're such a failure. No, right? You would, talk to them with, kindly. You would probably tell them that, hey, it's okay. You will, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the world and you can always learn through it. You can probably avoid that mistake next time. And you're only a human. It's okay. We all make mistakes, right? So, if you're finding it hard to be compassionate, just maybe talk to yourself the way you would talk to a good friend or you would talk to a young child. Maybe that can help you to talk to yourself more kindly. Here's another tip, for a lot of us can be very hard on ourselves, especially in times like these when we are struggling with productivity and having a routine. We might just feel very guilty all the time and we might be very hard on ourselves, right? So here's a small tip. I think we all make, to-do lists. I'm sure you all, do that. So, well, that's great. That's a great habit, making that to-do list. But, along with making that to-do list, I think what I really find helpful personally is making that list also. So maybe in the morning I made certain things that I needed to do. Maybe I did, 7 out of 10 of those things. I couldn't do 3. Just listing down those 7 things that I did, it just makes me feel so good and fulfilled about my day. So maybe that's another thing that you can think about. It's just like a very basic tip here. So yes, so that's the third point, which was self-compassion, and it can be a great habit that you can build upon, to be more kind to yourself. Now moving on to the next point, and that is what I call as knowing what's in your control and what's not. So in times like these, the pandemic, the reason why we all feel so anxious and we all feel so lost is probably because it's very uncertain, right? A lot of things are out of our control. So a lot of us feel helpless because of that. A lot of changes that has come by, which we did not anticipate. The mode of learning has changed. Now we need to be, learning through an online mode. There is, social isolation. We can't even meet our friends. A lot of things has changed, and we don't even know how things are going to go further, right? So there's so much uncertainty that we are dealing with. So now here's the thing. So when we think of all of these uncertainties together, it can seem very overwhelming. It can feel like that, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? So then I think when we segregate them, into 2 different categories, that what are the things which are in my control and what are the things which are not in my control, that automatically sort of makes it a little bit more clearer. And that helps you take actions about the things that are in your control and to ignore the things that are not in your control because, well, you can't do anything about them anyway, right? So people who are more resilient, they tend to focus a lot upon the things that they have in their control rather than ruminating over things that they don't have in their control. So for example, in the pandemic, that yes, whether you will get COVID or not, it's uncertain. It may not be in your control fully. But what is in your control? Well, maybe taking precautions, right? So taking the necessary precautions, staying in as much as you can, wearing the mask, and maintaining distance, even for your family, ensuring that you're having, the multivitamins and eating a healthy, nutritious meal. Well, these are things which are in your control. And as long as you're doing that, it can just help you, regulate your anxiety a lot more because you can tell yourself that I'm doing whatever I can, right? Another thing is that being in the present, right? So if you notice, any difficult emotions, whether it is sadness or it is anxiety, they're all to do with thought processes that are either related to the past or related to the future. So sadness is basically a consequence of when we are thinking about some situation that has already happened, right? That, oh, this happened, that happened. So sadness, guilt, anger, all of these are emotions that come because of something that has already happened. And anxiety, fear, worry, these are emotions that come because we are thinking about something that may or may not happen in the future. So now the past is something, again, we cannot undo, we cannot change. So ruminating over it is also not going to help us. And future is again something which is not in our control presently. So, whether it'll happen or not, there is no point thinking about that either. So what can help is just being in the present, because that can help you to do whatever preparations you need to do, whatever actions you need to take, right? So basically, people who are resilient, they tend to stay more in the present than in the past and the future. So if you find yourself moving to the past, or thinking too much about the future, the what ifs of it, quickly switch yourself back to the present moment. Just use that awareness to talk yourself out and like come back to the present moment. I know that's a hard thing. It can be difficult initially because it requires a lot of practice. But there are certain skills, certain skills that can help you. One of them is mindfulness. I'm sure you might have heard of mindfulness to now. So I'll give you a quick strategy here, a very basic mindfulness technique that can help you to come back to the present moment. And that is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. So it's a very simple technique which you can do at any point of time, point of time during the day, whether you're seated or sleeping, lying down, whatever that might be. So all you need to do is quickly just look around and notice 5 things that you can see around you. Okay. Just notice it and label it in your mind that, okay, I can see a chair, I can see the computer, I can see a pen, a diary, it's just 5 things that you can see around you. And then 4 things that you can hear around you. So I can hear the sound of cars in a distant, I can hear the birds chirping, just 4 any sound that you can hear around you. Quickly just try and notice that. The third is, try and notice 3 smells around you, 3 things that you can smell around you, any fragrance that you can get, and then 2 things that you can touch around you, any 2 textures, like you can touch the table or maybe touch a fabric that you might be seated on, just to activate that tactile sensation that you might be having. And the 5th thing is, maybe taste 1 thing that might be around you. Like if you have food around you, just quickly pick that up and taste it. Chances are you may not have food around you all the time. So then you can just quickly think of 1 thing that you are grateful for, 1 small thing that you're grateful for. So it's a very basic exercise. And I know it may seem like that, oh, it's so random. Will it even help me? But believe it or not, it can help you ground yourself. It can help you to bring yourself back to the present moment. And it's a very scientific technique, so you can try it sometime. It'll only take, barely, I think, 2 to 3 minutes anyway, right? So yeah, so there are a lot of other techniques like this. You can just figure out, you can just type mindfulness techniques, and I'm sure you will get quite a bit. So this is to do when you find yourself moving towards the past or the future too much, to come back to the present. So, well, yeah, that's the 4th point, to be more in the present and to know what's in your control, like segregating what's in your control and what's not, right? And now I think coming to my 5th point, and that is finding meaning, or rather making meaning, okay? So, as human beings, we are all meaning makers. We like to make sense of things. So when things don't make sense, when things seem too chaotic, we feel really lost, just like maybe in this pandemic. There's so much going on, and so much happening also suddenly, it just seems very overwhelming. It seems like we don't know how to make sense of it, right? So when that happens, it can feel very, very overwhelming and confusing for us to deal with it. So, and because human beings in general, we are meaning makers. So even religions that we believe in, it's because that's the way we try to make sense of the world around us. And why does it work the way it does? So which is why so many religions are based on this. And in general, this is what, our mind automatically tries to make meaning, make sense of certain things that's around us. But certain times when things are too chaotic, when things are too confusing, our mind may not automatically be able to make sense of it. maybe right now in this pandemic also, maybe a lot of us might not have been able to find meaning in these scenarios, in these trying times. So then what happens? It gets really crazy, which is why then we need to consciously try and make sense and make meaning of the situation around us. Okay, so of course, different people make meaning differently. There are various ways to make meaning of certain situations, and it can be very, very personal. What gives meaning to my day may not give meaning to your day, right? So it's important that we do or we find meaning that is close to our heart, that resonates with us, right? So it's important that you figure out that meaning making by actually reflecting on the things that give you meaning. Okay, you don't have to do something that the other person is doing. So there are a lot of ways of doing that. So for example, there are certain people find meaning by learning a new thing, by learning a new skill, or by being super productive. That okay, I'm gonna be doing a lot of things right now so that I feel good about my day, so that I feel fulfilled. There could be certain other people who find meaning by working out, even like by daily working out and working on their physical self. That gives them a lot of meaning. There could be some other people who find meaning in music. There could be some people who finds meaning by volunteering and helping and being in the ground and actually helping out, the greater, for the greater good, like making a difference for the society, by maybe donating their blood or plasma in current times, or volunteering for COVID relief. So there are various ways of doing that also, right? Some of us might find meaning by taking care of our loved ones right now, by being there with them, spending time with them, right? Either way, whatever your way of meaning making might be, it's totally okay. But just ensure that there is some meaning that you're making of this current situation. By meaning making, again, it just means something that drives you, something that gives your day a purpose, something that makes you feel a little fulfilled about your day, that yes, my day was it was of some worth. It did add some value, either to me or to my loved ones or to the society, whatever that might be. It can be completely something that is very self-oriented, also self-centric also, but something that makes you feel fulfilled, that drives you, that gives you a sense of purpose. So that's extremely important. And people who are resilient, they are very good with this meaning making. They always try and find something that gives them meaning, that helps them to move forward and gives them a reason to go by, right? To just like helps you go through a difficult time. So I hope that all of you can also find meaning if you haven't found already. Just I think very easy way to like look for that meaning is just asking yourself what gives life your meaning, what makes you feel like living, what gives purpose to your life, and maybe concentrating more on that and giving more time to that in this current times can also help a lot. So yeah, so I think having said that, I think I'm going to close on this very important quote by saying this very important quote, which I find extremely powerful. This quote is by this person called Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist who happened to be a survivor of the Holocaust. During that time, he was a part of the concentration camp. In fact, he was one of the very few people who survived that, the concentration camp. He was able to come out of it. And he's written a lot of books after that. So what he tells is that the reason why he survived was because he was able to find his meaning even in that concentration camp. He was able to find some meaning that helped him to get past and move forward. So here's the quote that that is there from his book, which is A Man's Search for Meaning. That's the book's name. A very extremely interesting book if you would like to read. So here's the quote. He says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. That is the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Isn't it so powerful? Anyway, on that note, I would love to, now interact with you all and, take up your questions if you might have any. And if you would like me to summarize, maybe I'll quickly summarize all of these 5 points. So the first point was, switching to a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. Remembering what neuroplasticity is and our, ability of our capacity of our mind to adapt to situations. The second was about being realistically optimist, in these situations, not just being, trying to tell ourselves that we should be positive all the time, but at the same time, just being hopeful while at the same time being realistic. The third is being compassionate to ourselves, just being watchful of the way we talk to ourselves. And the fourth was knowing what's in your control and being in the present moment. And the fifth is finding or making meaning in circumstances and challenging circumstances. Right. So I hope that helped. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Those were really enlightening words, and I would say so powerful words. And I'm really looking forward to use that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique myself. And taking the benefit of the chair, I would first ask you a question. As a non-professional, how can we deal with the situations, suppose when our friends come to us and they narrate their situation, their problems to us. But often at times, what I personally feel, I start retelling them my similar experiences rather than actually solving their problem. So how to deal with such type of situations?
Okay, great. Wow, that's a beautiful question, Aditi. And I'm sure this is something that a lot of you might have in your mind, right? And it is also a tendency that we tend to have whenever somebody comes to us with a problem, to help them with their problem. Obviously, the intention is right, to help them with their problem. We sometimes start narrating, our own similar experience of it, to tell them that, okay, well, they are not alone and that we are, that I have also dealt with it and this is how I dealt with it. So the idea is probably to give hope to them. But sometimes, sometimes when people are sharing something very personal or something very distressing, by talking about your problems, it can sort of maybe make them feel a little dismissed, make them feel unheard, because now suddenly the focus has changed from them to you, right? And I know that that's not the idea. But it can really make them feel invalidated, make them feel unheard, make them feel dismissed. So I think the best thing to do when somebody is confiding in you or sharing something personal is just by giving that space for them to talk about it, and giving them a very active listening ear. And sometimes even solutions are not important. It's not important for you to think of solutions for them or giving them advice or telling them what they should or they should not do. Because most of the time, that's not what we are looking for. When we are distressed, we are just looking to have that space for somebody to hear us, for somebody to empathize with us. Maybe solutions we already have in our mind. Maybe we already know what we should do or what we shouldn't do. But it's just the space that we are looking for. So as long as you can just listen to them, you can give them that non-judgmental space, that itself is like a huge thing. So stick to that. And if you find that it is probably too overwhelming, and if maybe you can suggest them to seek professional help, to maybe consider therapy, and because a lot of times we are not equipped, as non-professionals, we are not equipped to handle a lot of different things that people might be going through. So in that case, it might be helpful to suggest suggest them to probably seek a professional help rather than you trying to deal with it on your own, because then it can impact you as well. Right. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. As a follow-up question, how do we know that we need a therapy or a mental health related help?
Okay, awesome. I have a question for you. How do you know when you need exercise or when you need to work out?
It's just our brain that tells us that, yeah, it's the correct time to start working out.
Okay, so that means your body, something has to go wrong in your body for you to realize that I need to exercise?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So a lot of us maybe wait for that time that, okay, let something go wrong in my body, then I will start exercising or working out. Right? And there might be some of us who do it anyway, who do it every single day because, well, we believe in staying healthy and we believe in preventative measures, right? So it is same as how we look at physical health, you know. So if we believe that we should exercise every single day, we should eat healthy, irrespective of whether we have a problem or not, whether we have an illness or not. Similarly, therapy is just like that, you know. So you might want to seek therapy when something is going wrong in your life or emotionally when something is very overwhelming. But you may also consider therapy as just like a general well-being, you know, so that you have certain skills and techniques that can help you be more resilient, like we're talking about today, and that can, you know, build your self-confidence, that can give you tools so that you can deal with your situations better, you can deal with your emotions better, right? So it's as simple as that, you know. Just like you would treat a, you know, a physical workout, you would, you know, indulge in certain things that are preventative in nature, you may also do the same for your mental health. So therapy is actually for everyone, and there is no set time that you need to reach out for therapy. Like any time is a good time, honestly.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I think this answers the question of most of the people that when they get time to go for a therapy or seek mental health related help. Moving on to our next question. The question is sent to us by Shrijya Singh. What is the theory behind IQ? Does neuroplasty extend to IQ? Can IQ change with time?
Okay, interesting. Well, IQ, I think, if you know, if you're talking about intelligence, well, intelligence is very fluid, and intelligence comprise of much more than just IQ. So if you were referring to intelligence, well, intelligence, yes, neuroplasticity applies to intelligence as well. We can build on certain intelligence levels by exposing ourselves to it. When it comes to specifically IQ, well, IQ may not be applied to neuroplasticity, but IQ is just one aspect of intelligence. You know, now in fact, even most neuroscientists, psychologists, even brain surgeons, all of us are sort of, you know, recognizing the importance of EQ rather than IQ. You know, a lot of like us are focusing on the importance. We believe that EQ is so much more important in our life right now than probably IQ is. Because even if you have an IQ for something, if you don't put in the effort, if you don't have that growth mindset that we were talking about, you may even like leave things very quickly. You may quit certain things. You may not have the social skills required, you know, to grow or to be good in certain areas. So basically, IQ in isolation may not help you to get to where you want, but you may need to have a lot of other things as well, which can come with effort, that which can come with learning on the go. Doesn't have to be something that you are born with.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next question we have is from Sakshi Sharma. There are times when we get trapped in our thought processes. How can we challenge such thinking traps?
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I think this might be very true for a lot of us in this times as well. You know, we are all facing a lot of anxiety, and some of us might have that anxiety in the form of a lot of negative ruminating thoughts about our future or about our health or about our family's health for that matter, right? So how do we come out of it? So again, I think usually when clients come to me about this, I think I give them this example that you know, whenever we are like in life in general, when we talk to different people around us, um, a, a lot of different people we meet on our way, right? There are some people who exaggerate a lot. There are some people who are very modest and they would probably, you know, tone things down. There are some people who lie about certain things, right? And over a period of time, when we get to know them and we know that this is their pattern, we sort of start having a filter around those people. You know, whenever you know, we know that okay, this person exaggerates, and if he's saying that okay, he bought this watch for 10K, automatically our mind says that oh, maybe it must be just for like 5K, or maybe it was for 2K, right? You know, so we have these filters. Similarly, like, you know, if I were to tell you, even though like let's say I am a psychologist, but still if I were to tell you that, what, tomorrow it's going to snow in Calcutta, will you believe me? Maybe not, right? You might have your skepticism. You might just Google yourself, figure out, yourself and search whether, yeah, this is a fact or not. Is this true or not? And in case you do believe me just because I said so, then chances are that you are quite gullible. You might end up making a fool of yourself tomorrow by, wearing all these woolen caps and stuff, right? So obviously, we have these filters in our minds that help us to not make a fool of ourselves, that help us to separate a fact from what might be an exaggeration or a lie and things like that, right? So similarly, just like we have filters for people or friends, or people around us, why don't we have filters for our thoughts? Our thoughts are just like that. Our thoughts are not facts. So certain thoughts can be too exaggerated, certain thoughts can be too dreadful, can be like the worst come scenario. So I think recognizing that our thoughts are not facts, our thoughts are just thoughts, and maybe not giving them so much importance and significance can really help us from, not ruminating on it. Because whenever we focus on a certain thought, we build up those neural pathways, what we were talking about, neuroplasticity. So automatically we start to think more about it and more, and it starts to disturb us even more. So the best way to prevent that from happening is by not giving it importance, by just letting it come and letting it pass, because thoughts are harmless in nature. They are not going to do anything to you unless you believe them and then take actions around it, right? So while thoughts, you may not have direct control over your thoughts, you do have direct control over what you believe and what you don't believe in. So here's your answer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next question is sent to us by Samarth Sansar. He says, thank you so much, ma'am, for this insightful session. While I agree with all the points that you mentioned, I also believe that these things are easier said than done. Even if we choose to inculcate these habits, there are times when it gets really difficult to focus on these points. I might feel motivated for 2-3 days after the session, but slowly it goes away. So how do we ensure that we actually end up benefiting from them, not just for a week or so?
Well, I think it all boils down to practice, right? Practice, practice, and practice. It is all about making that habit, right? So, when we were talking about neuroplasticity also, it is all about doing this on a consistent basis, on a regular way. Only then those new neural pathways will develop. So yes, chances are that after 3 days, you may, again start to feel, let's say, demotivated, or it may help you for some time, but may not help other times. Yes, but the more you practice these, the more you try and incorporate these, the more your mind might start doing it on an auto mode as well. So right now you're doing it very consciously, but slowly when you keep doing it again and again, it might happen on autopilot. So, it is all about building that habit. Yes, it is easier said than done, but I think anything is, right? Anything that we need to learn, or, when we need to, do better at or succeed, we need to put in that effort. Nothing comes easy. So it is all about putting in that effort. And of course, if you need that extra support, you have therapy, you have professionals to help you out with, to give you that support and that helping hand initially. So feel free to reach out and seek help. We need not wait for something to crumble for us to break down to, go and seek help. It's always easier when we reach out, when we are in a better place. That can help us a lot more than reaching out when we are in a very breaking point. Just like with illness also, when we have, when the illness is in the initial place and then we sort of go to a doctor, we might recover faster than when we wait for it to just grow and then going to the right professional. So it's the same logic here as well.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it answers Samarth's question. Shreya is asking, in these testing times where on one side we are witnessing staggering health crisis and there are notions that what is of prime importance is, Taking care of your health and mental well-being, while on the other hand, the immense pressure of being able to meet the deadlines or securing internships, placements, etc., so that we do not lag behind in the competition thriving in the academic world. Can both these things be balanced out, or should an alternative coping mechanism be sorted too?
Okay, wow, that's a brilliant question, honestly. And yes, that is very challenging. When you do have these deadlines externally, when you are required to do certain things in this current times when it's anyway so hard and it's anyway so challenging. I can understand that it can be very, very difficult for a lot of us, and to focus on our mental health and at the same time focus on this. But this is how what I believe in, that usually, that they need to go hand in hand. When we focus on one and do not focus on the other, we will falter. So I know that these deadlines might pressurize you to ignore certain aspects of yourself and just focus on what you're required to do. But that's the thing, like, when we don't focus on our mental health, chances are that we might not be able to even focus on these deadlines, focus on what we are supposed to do. So it's almost like looking at self-care or looking at taking care of mental health as like a brain booster, as something that's going to boost us to meet these deadlines better, to be better at these placement interviews, to be better at our exams. Because when our mind is healthy, we are able to concentrate better, we are able to learn better and faster and quicker. So yeah, so it's not an either or situation. It's more like they go hand in hand. If the more you work on your mental health, the better you will be, to be able to deal with difficult scenarios and deadlines, and you will be able to be more productive too.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Tanish is asking, the pandemic has unfortunately put many in a position where they cannot escape from abusive homes, relatives. What advice do you have for them to cope up with the surroundings they have been forced into? And if I may ask this, could you talk a bit about how you decided to pursue this path and how Over a Cup of Tea was born?
Okay, thank you for that question. Yeah, I think yes, not all of us are privileged to have homes which are healthy, which gives us that space to be ourselves, which gives us our privacy, which basically is like a healthy environment, right? I mean, I know that a lot of us, are in homes which are very, very which can be toxic, which are dysfunctional in nature, which can be detrimental to our mental health. And I think what I have to say is that I feel you, honestly, it can be then a very difficult time for you. So if you are struggling right now, please know that it's extremely valid to be in a situation which can be very detrimental to us, which is very putting down, which has a lot of dysfunction. It can be very difficult to then to do anything constructive in that environment, right? But however, because of this pandemic, we are all stuck and there isn't much that we can do about it. So it can feel very, very helpless if you are stuck in that kind of a situation. So I think, I just want to say that what you're going through is very, very valid. And it's definitely, I'm sure that the challenges are very high. But because maybe certain things that you can't do, maybe just focusing on what you can do is maybe drawing those boundaries around. It can be in the form of physical boundaries. So for example, finding your own space in your home where you can just be yourself. Maybe if you're lucky, if you can like have a room to yourself. If not, finding a space for yourself, maybe a desk, which can be like your space and your place that can help you disengage with everything that's happening around you and like focus on yourself. And apart from physical boundary, even psychological boundary, reminding yourself that you are a separate individual, and that yes, a lot of things might be happening in the family and the relatives, but it can impact you only when you allow it to impact you. That is when you give that much importance to them and what they are saying. So I know it can be hard because they are your family and you're living with them constantly. But maybe trying to draw certain psychological boundaries that can be helpful. For this, I might suggest again, you do not have to deal with it all on your own. Maybe you can consider online therapy to help you out with it, because it can be very individualistic. So there is no specific, generalistic tip that I can give you. But I think given your individual situation, I'm sure there are certain things that you can do to draw those physical and psychological boundaries that can help you cope with your situation in a better way.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We have our next question from Vishwas Agarwal. He's asking, as you have mentioned about fixed mindset, there are times we are fighting amongst ourselves and really needs a therapy, but we cannot tell our parents about the same because of fear. What to do then?
Okay, the good news is that a lot of therapists, they offer the services on a sliding scale. So even if you don't tell your parents, chances are that you may be able to afford that therapy. And if you are from NUJS, well, NUJS have a tie-up with us, so you can anyway benefit from sponsored therapy sessions. Either way, I think if you try around it, there are ways. There are a lot of helplines that offer therapy completely complimentary, completely free of cost. So there is help when you seek for it, for sure. So please know that if you're struggling, you do not have to struggle on your own. If your parents don't approve of it, that's okay. You can still reach out. You can still talk to therapists. Even if chances are that most of them are going to offer a sliding scale or some discount to students. So you can avail of that and then seek help.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Aditi is asking, how can a teenager work upon oneself in order to adapt in a situation like today, where one has to deal with college, family, and other things at the same time, since the situation is taking a toll on a person's mental health?
Yes. It is very hard, right? So I don't think I can deny that how hard the situation is. I don't think, I would be totally hypocritical if I were to say that I am not anxious or that I don't feel lost sometimes. So as a therapist, I too, I'm going through a lot of anxiety myself. So honestly, if you are feeling difficult emotions right now, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling a little lost right now, it's totally okay. I think we're all going through that in some or the other degree. So please validate your emotion, embrace that emotion. You don't have to pretend that yes, everything is okay and that it's all, rosy, because well, it is not. There's so much negativity around. If you are not feeling, if you're not feeling that pressure of what's happening around you, then maybe something is wrong with you then, because it's totally okay to be anxious right now, totally okay to feel lost right now. But yes, like I said, that we can still find meaning out of this current situation. We can figure out our own coping mechanisms in these current situations, things that help you, things that give you purpose in your day. So maybe certain things that you can do to figure out that purpose, to feel a little fulfilled in your day, without being too hard on yourself, by being kind and by being compassionate to yourself. So even when you don't meet your expectation of your productivity, like for example, I am supposed to do these 10 things, but I could not do those 10 things. I think being more kinder to ourselves, and I think, well, even universities, colleges, teachers, a lot of us do understand right now, and a lot of us, are giving other people that leeway and cutting ourselves some slack, right? So it's happening on an institution level, it's happening on university level, it's happening on national level as well. So if you are finding it hard, it is okay to say that it is hard. It is okay to acknowledge that, to communicate that, without being too hard on yourself. And of course, like I said, help is available. If it's too hard, reach out, talk to a professional. I'm sure you will be able to deal with your scenario.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Sakshi is asking, are there some self-help materials that you would suggest to deal with anxiety?
Okay, self-help material. I think mindfulness that we talked about works very well with anxiety. So I think a lot of you might have heard of the app called Headspace. So Headspace has very good, mindful meditation things out there. So you can maybe download that. Then breathing techniques help a lot with anxiety. You can even like try that. There is this rectangle technique that, particularly is very helpful. So which is, basically what happens is when we are anxious and when we are told that breathing helps, a lot of us, we make a mistake of gulping a lot of air when we are anxious, and that unfortunately makes you even more anxious because it activates your sympathetic nervous system, which makes you very, very anxious. So the idea of breathing technique is to inhale, yes, but the idea is to exhale longer. So if you are inhaling for 5 seconds, exhale maybe for 7 or 8 seconds, right? That is going to help you to become calmer automatically. There is a scientific aspect behind it, which I will not get into right now. But just remember that, like the phrase that we have, a sigh of relief. Why do we have that phrase? It's because when we sigh, we're actually exhaling. And when we exhale, it helps us to feel relieved. It tells our body that we are safe. So when you're breathing, take those long, deep breaths, but ensure that you're breathing out longer than you're breathing in. That's going to help you calm down. Other than that, you can check out our Instagram page. We are posting a lot of resources on anxiety. In fact, the theme for this month is anxiety itself. So you may check out our Instagram page. It's called therapy.india. There are a lot of different reels and small, tips and techniques that we keep posting on anxiety. So you may check that out too.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Moving on to our last question. Repeating the question that how the cup of tea was born.
Oh, yes. It skipped my mind to answer that. Yeah. Well, yeah, actually, there is a story around it. So after I finished, after I moved to Kolkata, that's when I got married and I moved to Calcutta. Before that, I was in Bombay. So I was looking for places to work here. My idea was not to start my own center immediately. I thought maybe I will work at different places, gain more experience, like most of us do, right? So while I was looking out for places here in Calcutta, I realized that a lot of them did not resonate with me because a lot of them were very clinical oriented. And it just struck me that, when we are going to a therapist or a psychologist, we are supposed to speak about things that are so personal to us, things that we find it probably hard to even talk to our friends about, right? So if we have a very clinical environment wherein the therapist is wearing a lab coat and you have a very clinical setup there, it just makes it harder to open up. It's almost like we're building walls rather than putting it down. And it also increases the stigma that already exists so much around mental health. It's almost like you feel like you're going to a doctor or somebody who will like fix you or treat you. So that can be very inhibiting, right? So that's when I realized that maybe if I were to change the way we look at therapy, that can help so many people out there to actually reach out more. Because therapy is actually, like, if we break it down, it's actually just talking to how you talk to your friend over coffee or over tea. We are talking like that to the therapist, except the only difference is the therapist is a professional who is equipped to deal with everything that you're going through, and who probably, because of the training that they have had, they can probably give you, they can equip you with tools and techniques that can help you with your struggle a lot better. So that's how I came up with the name Over a Cup of Tea. And yeah, it actually worked. A lot of people did find it, and they did give me a feedback that they find it so much easier to come to us because, well, they don't feel like they are going to some clinical person. They feel like they're just going out there to talk to somebody who might help them and support them in their journeys.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was great to know how Over a Cup of Tea was born. And I hope this session helped each and every one of us. I would request everyone to switch on their cameras if possible so that we can have a virtual picture and cherish it with us. By the time, I would request Tanish Arora to give a vote of thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Tanish.
Thank you. Very good evening, Ms. Jain. On behalf of the informal discussion group NUJS, I, Tanish Arora, would like to express my sincere gratitude to you. We are extremely honored that you graced us with your presence today. It is a privilege for us to have interacted with you, and I'm sure each and every one of us is taking away something valuable from this immensely insightful session. I would like to thank you for enlightening everybody present here on the realms of resilience in the face of adversity and more. I would also like to thank the members of the committee who contributed in making this session a success. I would like to thank the members of the faculty and other attendees for their graceful presence and bringing up such wonderful and relevant questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanish. Thank you, Aditi. Thank you, Sakshi. I think it was a wonderful interaction, and I personally love the questions that you all threw at me. I really hope that this was a fruitful session. And in case you want to reach out further, please do feel free to reach out to us and do follow therapy.india. You know, a lot of content over there for emotional well-being. And yeah, I think that's about it. Take care of your mental health. It's very important.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.